Times and Seasons, a program dealing with significant issues of public concern.
Over 250 million people live in the United States. Some of the finest medical research and healthcare known to man is located here. But still, there are hundreds of thousands of Americans who suffer and die unnecessarily every year.
Hello, I'm Arnold Augustin. On this edition of Times and Seasons, we'll discuss tobacco use, not only in America, but other countries as well. We'll explore the origins of modern tobacco use, how and why it's used, how it affects the body, and how we together can virtually eliminate all the misery and death it causes.
When Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492, he and his crew also discovered tobacco. They observed the care of Indians in Cuba using tobacco in a mostly ceremonial way, by smoking it, and also using finely powdered tobacco as snuff. It first became popular in Europe mostly for its supposed curative powers, and by the early 17th century, the smoking of tobacco was almost worldwide. But even then, there were many who suspected the dangerous effects it would have on man, and its use was prohibited by many rulers of the lands to which it was brought. In 1604, for example, England's King James I characterized smoking as a custom loathsome to the eye, hateful to the nose, harmful to the brain, and dangerous to the lungs. He then promptly raised the import duty on tobacco by 4,000%. Turkish Sultan Murad IV, though, was considerably less tolerant. He reportedly executed up to 18 smokers a day. But despite these and some other rather severe measures, the use of tobacco continued to grow and took a huge leap forward with the invention in 1880 of a machine which could mass-produce cigarettes. Today, tobacco is a multi-billion-dollar worldwide industry, and the use of tobacco continues to be the leading cause of preventable death on this planet.
The fight against tobacco use is still the #1 public health problem in the United States if you talk about the people affected. AIDS has taken our attention because of its great potential for death, but think of it this way: all of the patients that have been diagnosed since 1981 with AIDS equals the number that die every month from tobacco.
One of the major problem areas we've still got is the still increasing incidence of smoking amongst teenage girls. And that has to be turned around, or else we will have a major problem there. In fact, we've now, just within the last year, found that the curve for lung cancer deaths in Canadian women has now crossed that for breast cancer, so that lung cancer is now killing more Canadian women than breast cancer has done in the past, and that's tobacco related. So we're reaping the harvest of women smoking now, just as we began to reap the harvest of men smoking several decades ago.
It's our most serious preventable cause of illness, disability, and premature death in this country. And it's been so, really, since we first discovered it, which was in the early 60s, when the Royal College of Physicians produced its first report on smoking and health.
Well, it's the most important cause of avoidable death in Australia. If you want a comparison, in this state of Victoria, with 4 million people, 17 people die every day from tobacco-associated disease, heart disease, lung cancer, etc. 7 people die every day from alcohol-associated disease, and less than 1 person dies every day from the use of hard drugs. So tobacco is a very high priority.
A high priority indeed. In the United States alone, 350,000 people suffer and die prematurely every year from diseases caused by tobacco use. That's the equivalent of a collision with no survivors of 2 jumbo jets every day. And the figures are equally shocking in other Western cultures. In Canada, with a population of 25 million, 32,000 people a year are killed by tobacco. The United Kingdom loses at least 100,000 of its citizens every year because of tobacco. And in Australia, with only 16 million people in the entire country, 33,000 die every year from the effects of tobacco use.
It's amazing how, to me at least, how after all these years of educational efforts, there are still a lot of people who don't seem to know how much they put themselves at risk when they smoke.
There are many other scientists who agree with Morrison, such as Dr. Ronald Davis, director of the U.S. Office on Smoking and Health.
There's probably a general understanding on the part of the public that this is a dangerous thing to do, but I don't think the public really fully comprehends how dangerous a habit cigarette smoking is.
For several decades now, scientists from every corner of the globe have warned of the deadly consequences of tobacco use. One of the earliest researchers on the relationship of tobacco use and lung cancer was Dr. Ernst Winder, now president of the American Health Foundation. Dr. Winder began his investigation in the late 1940s.
Well, we have learned that tobacco smoke and tobacco itself is carcinogenic to a variety of human tissues and organs, lung, larynx, oral cavity, mouth, bladder, pancreas. We've learned that tobacco use causes about 1/3 of all male cancer deaths in this country.
In Canada, at the University of Ottawa Heart Institute, Dr. Andrew Pipe deals on a daily basis with the effects of tobacco smoke on the human body.
There are at least 4,000 distinct chemical compounds in tobacco smoke, at least 50 of which we know cause cancer. But so many of the other effects are perhaps not as well understood by the general public. Insofar as the heart is concerned, for instance, nicotine causes your blood pressure to increase. It causes your heart rate to increase. As a consequence, the heart has to work harder doing what it does. As a consequence, its demands for fuel are much greater. In the heart's case, fuel is oxygen, which is delivered by the bloodstream. But carbon monoxide, which comes in the tobacco smoke, kicks off oxygen from something we call hemoglobin, and therefore the fuel, or rather the bloodstream, does not contain as much fuel. So that when a smoker takes a cigarette or drags on his or her cigarette, he increases his heart rate, increases his blood pressure. It's kind of like stepping on the gas. At the same time, he decreases the amount of oxygen available to the heart. That's like stepping on the brake at the same time, and we all know what that does to automatic transmissions. Nicotine as well tends to sensitize the heart muscle, and make it much more susceptible to suddenly go into an unusual heart rhythm, what we call ventricular fibrillation, so that the highest rate of sudden cardiac death that occurs when this fibrillation occurs in smokers, and smokers are many times more likely to be at risk for this form of cardiac death than are non-smokers.
Many people don't know that smokers are also at considerable risk of losing much of their hearing, and that vision is also affected by smoking. Indeed, as one researcher put it, it's almost impossible to find any part of the body that's not affected. And in the case of smoking in women, the risks are greatly compounded. Dr. Elizabeth Whalen, scientist and author, is the executive director of the American Council on Science and Health.
Of course, women have a number of unique additional risks they must look at. One obviously involves childbearing. At every aspect of the childbearing sequence, attempting to become pregnant, attempting to stay pregnant, to have a healthy child, and to have a child that survives the first few months of life. At every single one of those phases, cigarette smokers put their babies at risk. Women who smoke have more difficulty becoming pregnant. They have a higher miscarriage rate. They have a lower birth weight babies. They have a higher percentage of sudden infant death syndrome after the child is born. When they have that, they have the problem of use of the oral contraceptive, which is like we call a heart attack waiting to happen, or a stroke, and you begin mixing the oral contraceptive with smoking. So there's some unique facets that make smoking even more hazardous for women.
Another area of major concern today is the effect tobacco smoke has on the non-smoker in a smoke-filled environment. Once again, Canadian physician Dr. Andrew Pipe.
First of all, I think it's important to understand that the temperature of a cigarette that's lying there idling in an ashtray is much lower than the temperature at the end of the cigarette when somebody takes a drag on it. As a consequence, the combustion of the tobacco products is far less complete, and the smoke therefore contains far more impurities and chemical byproducts of incomplete combustion, and so in some respects is more hazardous than the smoke which a smoker draws into his or her lungs. We know that you and I, or anyone else who's in a smoky environment, draws these materials into our lungs. And you can, depending upon your workplace, go home every day with levels of nicotine and other compounds in your blood, in your urine, in your sweat, in your saliva, in your breast milk, if you're a breastfeeding mother, that approximate smoking between 2 and 11 cigarettes a day. And so it stands to reason that there will, over time, be an effect of this kind of exposure. And in the last few years, we're beginning to understand the rather unfortunate consequences of living with a smoker. We know that the incidence of lung cancer in non-smoking wives living with smoking husbands is much greater than that of non-smoking wives living with non-smoking husbands. We know that the incidence of respiratory disease, bronchitis, emphysema, bronchitis, pneumonia, middle ear infections in young children is much higher if they live in a home where one or both parents smoke, and those children will have a much higher incidence of admission to hospital emergency wards in their first years of life, for instance. So that there are very clear repercussions to a non-smoking individual that occur as a consequence of his exposure to other people's tobacco smoke.
There are literally thousands of tragic stories that could be told about the effects of tobacco use in all its forms, about the anguish it causes those who watch their loved ones suffer and die, and about the enormous dollar costs to families, business, and government. There are, however, some social groups which have been able to avoid many of those tragic consequences because of their long-standing policies against tobacco use.
In fact, the cancer epidemiologists have put a good deal of time in looking for and then examining groups which, for various reasons, sometimes religious, sometimes not, just abstain from tobacco use. There have been, in particular, two groups that have been looked at quite extensively. The members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, and the Seventh-day Adventists. And both of them show markedly less tobacco-related cancer deaths than the general population.
When all this is considered, and when people know and understand the tremendous risks, many have a very difficult time understanding why anybody would use tobacco. But there is one major reason. Tobacco contains a very powerful drug.
I think for a long time we tended to place all the responsibility for tobacco addiction on the smoker, and in that sense viewed them as villains. And I think only now are we beginning to be more sensitive and understand that in many respects smokers are victims. They are victims of an addictive process to perhaps one of the most highly addictive drugs that we know of. And they require some sympathy and some understanding, not vilification.
In fact, most experts in the field consider the nicotine in tobacco to be the most addictive drug we have. And as a form of drug taking, smoking is by far the most efficient. When smoke is inhaled, it takes just 7 seconds for nicotine to reach the brain. In 30 seconds, it has gone completely through the body. Not even the so-called mainline drug taking in the vein is that efficient. Those same authorities say as few as 2 cigarettes are enough to set up the addictive cycle in some people. Roberta Ference is a scientist at the Addiction Research Foundation in Toronto, Canada.
Yeah, we find that people certainly are addicted to tobacco, to smoking. In fact, there's some evidence that the physical addiction is as strong as it is to some fairly potent drugs. We find that people who want a cigarette within half an hour after awaking, these people are probably quite physically addicted to smoking. And even for those who aren't, there's a very strong psychological component. When people quit smoking, the first month or so you go through physical withdrawal and you experience a number of side effects such as irritability or trouble sleeping or trouble concentrating. But after that time, any feelings that desire you have for a cigarette or problems that you're having are due to the psychological habituation to smoking. And this can go on for months or even years. It's a very powerful psychological addiction as well.